thinking.
Patty, are you going to read the titles, or do you want me to?
I am.
Okay. It was Waiting for the Audience.
Waiting for the audience. I have to go back and get my water. We had bean soup for lunch, ham and bean soup. I've been thirsty all day.
Vibrant colors, nicely exposed. The fish eye effect, if it isn't in fact a fish eye, it's close to one. Sweeps your eye around through the interior of the theater. 26.
Inside, looking out.
It's a unique perspective. It's a really great effort because of that. It's bilateral but asymmetrical. It's very interesting because of that. 24.
Cathedral of Learning.
Which again, excellent exposure. The linear perspective gives you some sense of depth and dimension. Rather centered and maybe a little more powerful from lower or off to the side and not quite so symmetrical perhaps. 23.
Namaste.
Nicely balanced light between the interior and exterior. The lines in the floor are subtle, but they do sweep and lead your eye into the frame and up to the windows. Beautiful green colors in the leaves. 24.
The Walk of Shame.
Great mood, great texture, great dimension. Your eye is led down through the arches with light at the end, and that also helps to draw your eye in and through the composition. It may be a little soft in the foreground, a little more depth of field might have brought out some more detail. And the texture is so good there, it just isn't quite crisp right at the foreground, but very nice. 26.
Prayers in a Greek Church.
Immediate impact with the pop of the colors. It looks soft. It's hard to tell on screens sometimes, but it doesn't look sharp, either in the foreground or the background. 22.
Cathedral of St. John the Baptist.
About 90% an abstract, beautiful soft color, sweeping lines. 25.
Indian architecture.
Great texture, harmonious colors throughout, convey a real sense of calm. The circular geometry and the detail work very well to give it an overall mood and feeling. 26.
Where is it?
Under the dome.
Great point of view. It's not centered. It's more powerful than normal views up into domes because of that. There's a nice balance in the frame. The lighting is well handled, and the exposure is good. 26.
Inside the Library of Congress.
Nicely balanced full frame. Possibly a little less exposure would have helped deepen the mood a little bit of the photograph. There's a lot of possible photographs in here, and the foreground may actually be a distraction. 24.
Air Force Chapel.
You were looking at the picture, Patty?
No, I was turning my phone down.
There's a lot of geometry and power because of the geometric shapes. Triangles are one of the most powerful shapes you can have in a work of art. And the main focus is that triangle gives a sense of stability, and the lines leading upwards give it some height and dimension, a nice feel, good pop of color. 25.
Bolt castles, stained glass.
Once again, nicely handled point of view. It's not totally symmetrical. It's got some nice lines in the dome itself. The white at the bottom doesn't necessarily add a lot to it. The visual weight's all up on top. Sometimes that's a little unsettling to the eye. To have a composition with a little less of that white in may have been a little bit helpful. 22.
Stairway to inside the dolly.
Once again, not centered or static. It's got some flow and sweep, soft colors, comfortable feel. As your eye follows through, the diamonds in the background at least offer some relief, but as your eye is drawn to them, they're not particularly dynamic or powerful. 21.
From days gone by.
Lots of fabulous texture, nice point of view, a little bit off center from the aisle going down through the cells. The single door open is really a good opportunity to take a look at the technique of contrast and repetition. As you look all the way down through, there's a lot of doors, a lot of cells, but only one is open. Very intriguing. 26.
Lady of Victory Basilica, Buffalo.
Has an ethereal quality. The light, especially up in the top and the almost beams coming down through, are beautiful. Nice exposure. The colors are realistic and vivid. Good sense of depth and dimension. 26.
Excuse us.
Hold on, let me,
Everybody right in front of the elevator?
don't
I'm
fall.
okay, I'm worried
Don't
about
fall,
her.
don't fall over those cords. Are you all right?
Yes, I'm fine. I hate to
Come
do
on
this.
down.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, I just don't want you to fall over the cords,
Oh, I will.
all right? Yep, careful now.
Thank you.
Atta girl.
It's a nice picture.
Yes, it is. Where were we?
Did we title this? I don't
Here,
remember.
let me
Go
go
back.
backwards and see if it'll come up.
If walls could talk.
To get a nice sense of depth and height, good exposure. Your eye is definitely taken through. There is that sense of three-dimension, two-dimensional shot. It's as with most of the photos, it's at tripod height. Sometimes if you get down and there's detail in the floor, a little bit closer to the floor, and a wider angle lens, something a little different may have made this a little more powerful. 24.
Warwick Castle window.
It's a nice treatment of a natural framing looking out through the window, but it's heavy in the darkness on the sides. So much of the photograph is dark and featureless. A little bit different composition with a little less dark, and it's a little blown out in the light outside, and the detail is lost there. It's, as your eye is taken out there, there's not that much to look at out the window. 21.
Convergence. Conveyance?
Conveyor.
Conveyance. Sorry. As in conveyor.
Monochrome lends itself well to the subject and the interior of this building. It's gritty looking because of that. It's once again a little bit off-center, a little bit different perspective or point of view than just looking straight down a conveyor belt or an aisle or an alley. The exposure's right on. There's a nice tonal range. 27.
Warner Theater.
Color's great, exposure's great. A different point of view, refreshing. Once again, not looking straight down an aisle necessarily. Curve and sweep of the seats in the bottom give a little bit of motion to the photograph. 26.
Outside in.
Once again, it seems to be soft. The focus on the plants isn't quite tack sharp. It's a nice concept of the plants as a foreground element and the palm tree making the plane between the foreground and the sky and the dome. It's harsh midday light, and that's difficult to deal with. 22.
St. Paul's.
The fisheye effect accentuates the curvature of the stairs. It does give a sweep to the view. The keystoning up above is a little unsettling. Lighting exposure are good. 24.
Inside Little White Chapel.
Once again, dead on, right up the aisle. Does give you the linear perspective in the sense of depth and dimension. A little bit of a toned down exposure might have given a little better mood. It is a little bright. 21.
St. Conan's Kirks.
Nice range of tones. Lighting on the sides of the pews and the darkness next to them is pleasing, and it does lead your eye up to the brightest point in the composition, and it is bright and illuminates the arches in the back. 24.
Hoover Auditorium, Lakeside, Chautauqua.
Definite impact. The warm and actually hot colors certainly jump out at you. There's interesting texture in the seats. Receding arches give it a sense of depth. 26.
Condemned.
And the treatment with the monochrome lends itself well to the setting and composition. It does have that grittiness and the feeling of a prison, an old rundown one. There's nice textures, good lines. It's a simple, clean composition. 26.
Fly the Friendly Skies.
Great impact, bright colors, good exposure. The wavy lines are very pleasing to the eye as you sweep on through the photograph. 27.
Weather's Country Estate, Winterthur Country Estate.
Some nice sweep and line in the photograph. Somehow the banister is a little bit distracting here, perhaps. It's also got a lot of just a little bit too much negative space. 20.
Column and Ceiling.
There's definitely a warmth that you can feel, the lighting and color, whether during capture or post-processing. It's very pleasing. There's great detail in the top of the column, and then rather simplistic lines in the rest of it, and that juxtaposition is interesting and pleasing. 27.
Welcoming.
The exposure is handled well. The color seems a little disturbing. If the walls are truly that color, that's fine, but a little bit jarring between the red and kind of greenish hue. Does lead your eye into the room. There is some wood, some texture, and some line in there. 22.
Stairway at the Dolly Museum.
It's a very nice composition. The sky is a little bit bright, and there could be more contrast and a greater tonal range. It's pretty much just bright, and then the neutral gray, it lacks pop and depth because there's no real dark or black components to it. 21.
Rainbow ceiling.
Very different, vibrant colors, tack sharp throughout the entire photograph. Symmetry and balance is pleasing. The frame is filled nicely. The lighting is beautiful. 28.
Peeping palm.
It's an interesting perspective. It's got a lot of pictures inside this single picture. The portals out through the top are somewhat diminished by this railing over here. There's a lot going on, and the lighting is quite bright and harsh. 20.
Going towards the light.
Well handled and different. The person in the doorway there, the silhouette, is an added dimension and an eye tickle when you are following through the photograph with your eye and come to something that's desirable, and the silhouette works well. The colors and the light up above are fabulous. The exposure's right on.
Galleria.
Great moment in time. Everybody frozen in mid-stride is interesting. There is a keystoning effect that is a little bit intriguing, but I don't know if it helps the photograph.
Golden Palace.
Beautiful soft light. It has a little bit different perspective being up high looking down, but once again it's balanced and lacks anything really dynamic, but well handled exposure wise and lighting wise. 24.
Okay, we made it through. So what we usually do next is just go through and take a look at first places. So, in the bronze, Melinda Isaacson. Silver, Russ, of course. In gold, the highest score is 27, Ning Shen. In diamond, we have two 26s, John Lutz and Bob Rada. And in platinum, the highest score is a 29, Bob Grubbs. Okay, so we're going to go to the general competition, Tony.
Egret.
Is that focused as much as it can be?
It's autofocus.
It is. It is what it is.
It's the same on the screen.
Uh, It is out of focus. It is soft. And the background is very much competing with the subject. It's very busy. And the position of the bird in the frame is nice, and it's got some nice sweep to the feathering on the bird's wings there. It's got some sweep and motion, but there's a lot going on in the background, and it is soft focus 17.
Worried father with typhoid baby.
The subject is definitely engaged with the viewer. You can feel some empathy. It's a great photojournalism shot. It tells a story and does it quite well. Touch less exposure perhaps would darken the scene and the mood even a little bit more. It's engaging, 27.
Impact red.
Absolutely vibrant color. No competition from the background. The background is very well handled. Bird is on a branch and an angle that adds to the photo and takes nothing away. The sharpness is there. The bird's face is clean and clear. It's a 30.
Coneflower at sunrise.
It's nice sweep and softness. The petals are soft and look soft, and it comes across in this photograph. The background isn't completely blurred, but it doesn't compete with the main subject. And it's got some life and interest to it. 26.
Snow fence.
it's a very nice composition. It's got great contrast. It's simple and clean and clear. The exposure could come down a little bit, both in the sky and in the snow. Both are a touch blown out, but it's a great subject, handled well. Exposure is a little bit hot. 26.
Road trip.
It's a nice concept, good still life. Maybe once again a little bit hot in the lighting, especially on the wood in the bottom. It's got some diagonal lines. It's telling a story once again. 23.
New York City Central Park.
Good example of natural framing. The clouds are in the sky are stunning. There's the exposure, the pastel blue sky, the color. The trees look a little soft, and the building looks a little soft. A little additional depth of field would have carried your eye through a little more cleanly to the main subject, which is the building. 26.
Shoreline.
It's a nice time of day. It's not the harsh midday light. There's some texture to the clouds. The composition is handled fairly well with the foreground, middle ground, background, sky. It does bring your eye back and through it and give you that sense of depth and dimension. Near foreground with leaves and debris are dull and distracting. Lift up the camera a little bit to exclude some of that distraction may have been helpful, and or a little bit different point of view and a little bit of angle on the line of boats may also have brought a little more drama to the scene. 26.
Enlightened.
Simple, elegant composition. Subtle gradations in the tone, subtle colors. It's got a real nice feel. The light from the sun hitting the water in the background is pleasing. It's not blown out, and it complements the rest of the scene very well. 26.
Sunrise, North Pier Lighthouse.
It's a nice perspective on the pier and the lighthouse. The birds are a great addition. Catching it with a light on is always a good thing in the lighthouse. The horizon is awfully straight. It appears noisy or over saturated in post-production, or maybe just a little bit soft in focus. 22.
22?
Yes.
Iron gate and arched passageway.
A partially open door is an interesting treatment of the hallway and the architecture, a little bit inviting and a little bit daunting. The lighting's good. The composition, other than the door, the gate is once again a little centered and not particularly dynamic. The complementary colors with the blue floor and the gold color up in the arches is pleasing and desirable, and you are looking down towards a light that also helps to bring your eye back and through, give a little extra sense of dimension. 26.
Portrait of a Sumatran tiger.
Exposure is great. Colors are realistic. His face and eyes are sharp. Background is well handled. Looking slightly away from the camera. I either want to know where he's looking and his eyes aren't leading me to anything else in the frame, or it would be better to be fully engaged with his gaze full into the camera and into the viewer. 25.
Lady slipper orchid.
Great exposure, nice color. It's artificial light and it looks it. If a little more diffusion or simply less light was flashed onto it, it would probably make it a little softer looking, which is probably desirable for a flower photograph. The lines of the leaves down below help to frame it. The grasses and stuff in the lower left and lower right are a little bit distracting, possibly recomposed to eliminate those grassy areas in the bottom. Would have brought your eye more and completely into the flower. 23.
Waiting for spring.
It's a great composition. It's very clean, and the main subject is clear. It's got some depth and dimension to it. The snow is heavily textured, I assume, in post-production, and it's a tad gritty for a soft snow scene, but the lack of color, and the repetitive hills in the background make it a very compelling composition. 28.
Melt.
Great shot technically. I like looking at the image in the drop as it's coming off of the icicle. Simple, clean, cool colors that lend themselves to the subject. 27.
at the minimalism exhibition.
Appropriate title. Subject has a good contemplative look and makes you wonder what he's thinking. It is a spare composition. There's a nice gradation of lighting and the gold behind the gentleman up into the brighter area where you're asked as the viewer to bring your eye. You want to look where he's looking, and that's where the lighter part of the frame is. That's a very good technique. 28.
Gulf Dunes.
There's beautiful texture, there's interesting features. It's a good treatment of the horizon line when you are asking your viewer to look mostly down below. You place the horizon line high in the frame, which this artist has done. And if the horizon line were lower in the frame, you would be asked to look at mostly a featureless sky. The treatment of the edges, the raggedy appearance, I think is distracting. It makes a busy photograph busier. And there's a heaviness of that large dark area on top, and then the expanse of white on the bottom. It's the weights. The visual weight is up in the featureless sky and not down in the foreground. 22.
The Drift.
Beautiful texture, nice sweeping lines, soft and subtle. That's maybe it is like a reverse vignette where it's brighter on the corners and leads your eye into the darker subject. It's a nice treatment for this particular composition and subject. A touch bright and hot on the far left of the dunes. 29.
God's House.
Once again, the linear perspective is obvious and working. We are brought right through the frame up to the altar, the repeating arches in the top, the linear perspective down through do give this photograph a nice feel of dimension. The lighting is good. It's got a great tonal range. It's a well-handled monochrome, a little static in composition. 27.
Evening.
Nicely filled frame, soft, subtle lighting, light colors on the flowers make them stand out and give them dimension against the darker blue background. Very painterly. 28.
Solar eclipse at sunset.
It's a great concept and a good effort. All that is truly visible is basically that partial sun that is blown out. Of course, there's no detail and it's difficult to get any in the sun, but around it it's awfully hot. Difficult shot to get. 19.
The burned section of Fort Pulaski.
It's fascinating color. It's vibrant and it's still soft and subtle. That doesn't detract from the texture and the depth of the photograph. It's very artistic and it's 28.
Guiding lights.
Interesting perspective. The lights are handled well, exposure-wise. The subjects themselves and the view up at that ceiling are of rather plain items and background. 20.
Abandoned.
That's a nice subject. It's handled well compositionally. The focus appears a little soft in the foreground and the sky is featureless and milky white. Doesn't add anything. The time of day is tough to deal with. And that little pop of color in the background that draws your eye in is almost the central, makes that almost the central focus of the photograph, and there's not that much there to hold the viewer's attention. 18.
Turnpike Street.
It has the look of a bygone era. Once again, the sky is bright and featureless, somewhat distracting. There's a convergence of the tree against the left-hand edge of the building and recomposing with a little bit different point of view and separating that tree from the building would have helped the composition. Also, a time of day with different light would have given a greater tonal range to the photograph and given it a little more pop. 20.
Fresh salmon, anyone?
It's a great behavior shot. The bear isn't just posed or a portrait of him. It's a great moment to capture. Probably already as far as the lens or focal lengths in the maker's camera bag would extend. There is a lot of water around the main subjects and is a little bit distracting. Good exposure, maybe just, it's hard to tell on the screen. I guess it's sharp enough. I can't say anything about that. Yeah, a lot of background and a lot of bright around an interesting moment in nature. 20. 27.
The bird.
Very different treatment of a backyard subject. Beautiful feathering on the bird's breast. The beak really pops. It's hard to see the eyes and the forehead. It is a little bit out of focus, a little more. I think the focus is a little more on the breast than it is on the beak and the forehead and the eyes of the bird. And if that were reversed, or if a little more depth of field were present to really crisp up the head, the eyes, and the beak, it would help the photograph. The background is fabulous. The snow flying is great. Also, the bright matte, I guess, digital matte, whatever you want to call it. I don't know that helps the image. 23.
Backyard creek.
Textbook S-curves going back into the distance. It's a nice shot with the depth of darkness in the water, but some areas of the snow are a little blown out. It's great to have full tonal range, but there is detail missing, and it's a little tougher to look at the white. Maybe a little less exposure would really crisp things up. It's a beautiful composition, and it's a great scene. 26.
Cuban paradise.
It's a great candid street scene. The sepia works. That treatment lends itself to the scene. It looks retro. It's an interesting moment, frozen in time, and looks at. It's interesting to look in the window behind. Even see the. I don't know who the actor is. Cowboy in a cowboy hat. There's a lot going on. But what there is in the background seems to support the subjects. They belong in the setting, and the setting enhances the scene and the subjects. 28.
Autumn at the Falls.
A nice perspective in that it leads your eye from the foreground in the river back around a curve to the waterfall. The lower left in the frame is out of focus and doesn't add anything to the image, recomposing more with the main subject highlighted in the frame, and less distraction of that foreground may have been helpful. The leaves on the tree up above are bright and draw your eye, and probably a little more than would be desirable. That yellow is a little hot and competes with the falls. It's a good solid landscape, and it's a very good photograph. 26.
Toadstool Forest.
tack sharp, good little intimate view of the forest floor, nice colors. You can feel the textures in the toadstools. The litter in the front adds to the photograph. It looks like a forest floor, and the branches and leaves and light at the top take away a little bit. Even just, they are out of focus, and the selective focus with the toadstools and the main subject in the foreground being sharp, and then that being out of focus up on top in the background helps. But even just simply darkening that background a little bit, post-processing, would be helpful, or recomposing in the beginning to eliminate that as much as possible would be very helpful. But it's a nice shot, 27.
Going for the kill.
Wow, power, motion, sharpness, the composition is fantastic. The bird in a dive is a very unusual behavior to catch them in photographically. It's impossible to do in a wildlife shot, and that stick that crosses the eagle's tail is a little bit distracting, and probably for anybody that knew what they were doing, you could easily pop that stick out of there, the one that crosses the eagle's tail. That's the only thing that I can see that detracts from the photo. Possibly darkening the whole background a notch, once again in post-processing, but what a moment to capture. 29.
Chicago at 10,000.
Nice concept, good line, the diagonal line of the shoreline. It's not just straight on, and it has a little bit of life because of that diagonal line. An awful lot of dark in the lower right-hand corner, and it almost becomes an abstract looking at the city. There's no clear or clean subject or focal point. But it is an interesting abstract, and the exposure is great. 21.
The Queen's Wings.
There's a lot of photographs in this photograph. There's a lot going on. The flower top and the dragonfly compete for the viewer's attention, and the flower top pretty much wins. It stands out more against the background, and it's lighter, brighter, bigger, and bolder. The delicateness and the interesting wing structure and the dragonfly are lost because of that. The background is also bright and complicated. If it were blurred and darker, it would certainly help the photograph. And the stem and leaves sticking up on the lower left-hand side of the frame are not just distracting in and of themselves, but they also intersect with